3, or 4. We chose the middle one. So we're on a 3-year track, which should have us publishing in February 2014. There's quite a long period in draft international standard where ISO does stuff to it. So you can see that most of our technical work is front loaded. We've had a very busy 18 months to hit the point where we are now. You can see we've met 4 times in various parts of the world, and our next meeting isn't scheduled until almost a year's time, because there's a lot of ISO stuff that goes on, like translation and typesetting and things. And I'm not sure where our next meeting is. We will discuss that next week in Prague. So that's kind of what I wanted to introduce. I wanted to keep it relatively short. I recognize you've got a busy schedule today, and give you a very brief overview of where we are with that. So hopefully you recognize that PAS 55 was almost the beginning of the journey. And now we are very much building on PAS 55 and other documents as basis for the ISO 55000 work. We should see ISO 55000 published in February 2014. I think the last thing I would add on there is Canada is a participant, but not only that, it's a very active participant. We generally have a strong delegation from Canada who engage in all of the big debates, to be honest, and engage very positively. They've brought a very strong public sector view and infrastructure view into the discussions, which has been very helpful and constructive. And we hope to see the Canadian delegation next week engaging to the same extent they have in the past. So I'll pass you back to our chair. If you have any questions, I'll take them when you've scheduled to take them, either now or in the open discussion when the other 2 speakers have spoken. But thank you very much for your time, and my apologies for not being there in person.
Thank you very much, Rise. We're going to just stay with us. We're going to turn the camera so you can see the screen for the other speakers. And I'm going to bring them up now. So I wonder if you could get us to Bill's presentation. So we're now moving to the North American continent. And our first speaker will be from the United States. Bill, if you can give us your perspective on infrastructure issues.
Well, thank you. Slides come up. There we go. Okay. Yeah, a little bit about me. I've been drinking and sleeping this sustainable infrastructure rating system for quite a while, which you'll hear at the end, but it's really our basis of starting to look at infrastructure from a systems point of view and try to deal with it. As I said, I'm from the US, to use Ian's parlance. I'm from Baja, Canada. We do a lot of work down in the area of infrastructure, and I've been involved in a number of committees, as suggested before. I won't go into the summary. I'm going to try to get through a lot of this very quickly and leave room for questions. But I want to start with the importance of infrastructure, which maybe people don't realize. People have said that people in society kind of take this for a given, but it's a major contributor to national competitiveness, as well as something that's generating quality of life. And I looked at the World Economic Forum's report. Talks about infrastructure as being one of the 12 pillars of competitiveness, meaning that you've got to have good infrastructure in order to be competitive in the world today. It's also important for quality of life, because the same sort of things that you have for infrastructure for competitiveness contributes to people's quality of life. They get affordable resources and supplies because it's able to be delivered well. You have easy access and mobility, reliable sources of energy. And it's really the kind of thing that people want, and we'll talk about it more a little later, but it's the kind of quality of life, if you look at the US and Canada and many developed countries, that people around the world are aspiring to. Now you say, well, if this is so great and it's part of our competitiveness, gosh, the U.S. really must be on top of it. And the real concern right now is we're in trouble. And we'll look at a couple of things, not as only the ASCE report card, but some of the initiatives going on. ASCE has been producing this report card for about 15 years, and 1988 we gave ourselves a C. Right now we're at a D, and you can see in all of the grades there, from aviation to solid waste to roads and schools, we're in pretty bad shape. The estimate cost to fix that is going to be $2.2 trillion over 5 years if we ever chose to do that, and we're not doing it, as I mentioned earlier. And if you look again at competitiveness, the World Economic Forum reported that we dropped from 1st to 15th place in just 5 years. So it's a matter of neglect, and things go to pretty bad shape very quickly. What ASCE is trying to do, this is the American equivalent to the CSCE. We've started looking at that in terms of investment. It's not just it's a D, but if you don't invest, you're going to be losing about 700,000 jobs in terms of water, and you can see some of the lists here. The idea is to show that there's a return on investment that one can get, but so far that's fallen on deaf ears, and so we're hopeful that people will think about this some more, but we don't have a lot of hope until the next election. Now, what's the impact of this on the U.S. economy? And if you look at ourselves in terms of the systems that we have here that give us this quality of life, we need to start looking at and how we compare to other nations. Now, I've been using this graph. It's a really interesting one. I encourage you to take a look at it. It comes from some of the work we'll see in a moment. But if you think about quality of life, it says, okay, we've got this quality of life we want to achieve and people are aspiring to. And then how did we get there? What's the ecological footprint? How much of the resources and ecosystems should we use to get us there? And here's where I say, fasten your seatbelts. If you look at this graphic, it shows that one, Human Development Index is along the x-axis here, and to get where developed countries are, you need to get a Human Development Index of greater than 0.8, and that index is composed of lifespans, how much people are earning, and how much education they have. So it's pretty basic, but it gives you some idea there. And there we are. If you look at USA, you know, again, we're way up there. We beat you, Canada, unfortunately. We beat you in the wrong direction. But we're using about 5 planets to get that kind of quality of life. Canada's about at the 2 to 3 level. So we're using up more resources than we have in order to achieve that, which is a pretty bad state. Interesting, China has moved along here, and my question earlier was, you know, is China going to move this way or this way, depending, and India's close behind. So a lot of it depends on what kind of technologies and infrastructure countries are going to use to get themselves, again, where they need to be. And everybody's striving to be in that, go in that direction. Interesting, again, we came in second here. We're only exceeded by the United Arab Emirates, and these are the guys that brought you the indoor ski area in the desert. So, you know, we've got a lot to do to catch up to them. But the important thing is if you look at biocapacity consumed per person in the world level, it's about 2.59, and the units here are global hectares per person. I won't go into it's an impact on resources and ecosystem services, which might. And the world is about 1.81. And so we're well behind there, about 50% over what we need to be. And you can see some of the others there. Now, what have we done here? Where is this happening? Well, if you look at why these numbers are where they are for the US and the world, actually, and here I'm focusing on the US, most of it is done by infrastructure. It's the kind of decisions people are making in countries about how they're going to use resources and ecosystem services in order to achieve that kind of quality of life. So, you know, we're up here, energy consumption use 20% of the resources with 4% of the population. Interesting, a lot, 70% is infrastructure. Importantly, 95% is transportation using petroleum fuels, which has a strategic issue for us. Importantly, down here, and we'll talk about this later, water consumption, we're number one, again, yay, up on the top there. But a lot of this is used for cooling. Now, what's happening in the southwest of the US is that we're using up these resources. We had droughts. Not only do we have less water in the rivers to supply this cooling power for the electric generating plants, but that water is getting warmer. And so we've got a number of things happening which kind of build upon themselves that make that all tough. Greenhouse gas emissions, China, you surpassed us. We'll catch up, we're going to try. But we're, again, number 2 in generating greenhouse gas emissions, all of which factor into this kind of situation we're in. Okay, so how do we change the trajectory here? You saw where all these little bubble charts were. And again, what's interesting, US is up here, and it had a trajectory that from 1975 to current date, which this was 2003, but it's still representative of where things are. Australia, by the other hand, kind of went this way. And so you can improve your quality of life and not necessarily go up in terms of consuming ecological resources. So there becomes the problem for the world, really. How do you improve or at least maintain quality of life without messing up the environment anymore? And so there's some lessons learned here. We're not sure what they are yet, but and I think Australia in later years went up again, so apparently they're changing their trajectory as well. But that's the problem. You know, how do you drive that down using less, to keep the quality of life, using less resources and less ecosystem carrying capacity? And so what I try to do is look at this in a way. If you think about, this is where the problem lies. Each of the projects we're doing in terms of infrastructure somehow have driven that trajectory up. And you can look at these as little project vectors. They're all coalescing to make that movement in that direction. If you look at the situation with infrastructure deterioration, it's also driving it this way, because the more it deteriorates, the less efficient we are, and in many of the cases, the poorer quality of life. So we're kind of in that situation. So the idea is to find projects, the projects we now need to do, need to start driving this down. And if you drive it down, you're kind of improving quality of life, improving or rather reducing the impact on the environment, so things are better. If you go in these other directions, you're in the direction we've been doing, we're exploiting. If you go this way, you're sacrificing. If you go this way, it's really stupid. I mean, you're making things worse for yourself and the environment. But, you know, we have an opportunity to do that too, I guess. Okay, so what are the strategies? Again, if you want to drive this down, it's going to be improving energy efficiency, reducing dependence, greenhouse gas emissions and the like, the whole laundry list of things you want to do, but you've got to drive it in a way that each of these projects now contributes to somehow improving that and results in a net reduction of